As we saw last week, the sages understood Tzarat, the theme of this week's parasha, not as an illness, but as a miraculous public exposure of the sin of Lashon Hara, speaking badly about people. Judaism is a sustained meditation on the power of words to heal or harm, mend or destroy. Just as God created the world with words, so we create and can destroy relationships with words. The rabbis said much about Lashon Hara, evil speech, but virtually nothing about the corollary, Lashon Tov, good speech. The phrase doesn't appear at all in either the Babylonian or Yerushalmi Talmuds. It figures only in two midrashic passages, where it refers to praising God. But Lashon Hara doesn't mean speaking badly about God, it means speaking badly about human beings. So if it's a sin to speak badly about human beings, is it a mitzvah to speak well about them? My argument will be that it is, and to show this, we're going to take a journey through the sources. We begin with the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, in which we read the following. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 preeminent disciples, Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, Rabbi Yoshua ben Chananya, Rabbi Yosei, HaKohen the priest, Rabbi Shimon ben Netanel, and Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. Hu hayam moneh shivchan. He used to recount their praise. He used to say, Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, a plastered well that never loses a drop. Yoshua ben Chananya, happy the one who gave birth to him. Yossi the priest, a pious man. Shimon ben Netanel, a man who fears sin. Elazar ben Arach, Mayan HaMitgaber, an ever-flowing spring. However, the practice of Rabban Yochanan in praising his disciples seems to contradict a principle we read in the Talmud. Rav Dimi, the brother of Rav Safra, said, "Let no one talk betovato shel chavero, in praise of his neighbor, because praise will lead to criticism." Well, how will praise lead to criticism? Rashi gives 2 explanations. One is, having delivered excessive praise, yoter midai, about somebody, then I myself will come to qualify my remarks, admitting for the sake of balance that, well, actually the person isn't that good, he has also some faults. Or, alternatively, says Rashi, others will point out his faults. For Rashi, the crucial consideration is the praise judicious, accurate, true, or is it yoter midai, overstated? If the former, it's permitted. If the latter, it's forbidden. So clearly Yochanan ben Zakkai praised his students by being careful not to exaggerate. Rambam, however, sees things differently. He writes, whoever speaks well about his neighbors, bifnei sun av, in the presence of his enemies, is guilty of a secondary form of evil speech, avat lashon hara, since he'll provoke them to speak badly about him. According to the Rambam, the issue is not whether the praise is moderate or excessive, true or false, but the context in which it's delivered. If it's done in the presence of friends of the person about whom you're speaking, then it's permitted. If it's in the presence of his enemies and detractors, then it's forbidden, because praising the person will then become a provocation, and it'll have bad consequences. Are these merely 2 opinions, or is there something different and deeper at stake? There's a famous passage in the Talmud which discusses Ketzad Merakdim Lifnei Hakala, how one should sing the praises of a bride at her wedding. Our rabbis taught, how should you dance before the bride? In other words, what should you sing before the bride? The school of Shammai say, sing, the bride is as she is. The school of Hillel say, Kala na'av v'chasudah, sing, the bride is beautiful and gracious. The school of Shammai said to the school of Hillel, if she were lame or blind, would you sing that the bride is beautiful or graceful? Doesn't the Torah say, midvar sheket tirchak, keep far away from falsehood? The school of Hillel answered the school of Shammai, saying, according to your view, if somebody made a bad purchase in the market, should you praise it in his eyes, or should you tell him he made a bad purchase? Surely you should praise it in his eyes. The disciples of Hillel hold that at a wedding you should sing, the bride is beautiful whether she is or not, and Shammai's disciples disagree. Whatever the occasion, don't tell a lie. Do you call that a lie? Respond the Hillelites. In the eyes of the groom, at least, the bride is beautiful. Just as in the eyes of somebody who's just made a purchase, he thinks he has made a good deal, even if in your opinion he hasn't. What's really at stake here isn't just temperament, puritanical Shammaites against good-natured Hillelites, but actually two views about the nature of language. The Shammaites think of language as a way of making statements, which are either true or false. The Hillelites understand that language is about more than just making statements. We can use language to encourage, empathize, motivate, inspire, or we can use it to discourage, disparage, criticize, and depress. Language does more than convey information. It conveys emotion. It creates or disrupts a mood. The sensitive use of speech involves social and emotional intelligence. Language, in J.L. Austin's famous account, can be performative as well as informative. The argument between Hillel and Shammai is similar to that between the Rambam and Rashi. For Rashi, as for Shammai, the key question about praise is it true or is it excessive? Is it false? For the Rambam, as for Hillel, the real question is, what's the context? Is it being said in the presence of enemies or friends? Will it create warmth and esteem, or will it create envy and resentment? We can go one further, because the disagreement between Rashi and the Rambam about praise may actually be related to a more fundamental issue, namely the nature of the command, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. According to Rashi, the command means don't do to your neighbor what you would not wish him to do to you. However, according to the Rambam, the command, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself, includes the command, l'saper b'shivcho, to speak in his praise. Rashi clearly sees praising your neighbor as optional. Rambam sees it as falling within the command of loving your neighbor. We can now answer a question we should have asked at the very outset. The Mishnah in Avot speaks about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai having 5 famous disciples. Now, Avot is about ethics. It isn't about history or biography. Why does it tell us that Rabbi Yochanan had 5 great disciples? That surely is a fact, not a value. It's a piece of information, not a guide as to how to live. However, we can now see that the Mishnah is telling us something very profound indeed. The very first statement in Avot includes the principle, Hemidu talmidim harbeh, create many disciples. But how do you create disciples? The answer is by acting as Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai did when he praised his students, showing them their specific strengths. He didn't flatter them. He guided them to see their distinctive talents. Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, the cemented well that never loses a drop, wasn't creative, but he had a great memory, which was important in the days when the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral law, was not yet written in books. Elazar ben Arach, the ever-flowing spring, was creative, but he needed constantly to be renewed by mountain waters. Years later, Elazar ben Arach forgot this, separated himself from his teachers, and forgot all he ever learned. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, in other words, took a Hillel Rambam view of praise. He used it not so much to describe as to motivate. And that is Lashon Tov. Evil speech diminishes us. Good speech helps us grow. Evil speech puts people down. Good speech lifts them up. Focused, targeted praise, informed by considered judgment of an individual's strength, and sustained by faith in people and their potentiality, is what makes teachers great and their disciples greater than they would otherwise have been. That is what we learn from Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. There is such a thing as Lashon Tov, praising other human beings. According to Rambam, it falls within the command of V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. According to Avot, it is one way of raising up many disciples. It is as creative as Lashon Hara is destructive. Seeing good in people and telling them so is a way of helping it become real. And you thereby become a midwife to their personal growth. If so, then Lashon HaTov tells us that not only must we praise God, we must praise people too. Shabbat Shalom.